Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. Great time for New York basketball. The NBA season is winding down. The Knicks are hoping to get back their captain, Jalen Brunson, soon, at least before the season ends. They just are back from a 5-game road trip. We're going to talk about that. Also, later in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the St. John's Red Storm as they are about to begin the real NCAA tournament March Madness run. Got a special guest to talk about the Knickerbockers, so let's get right to it.
The Knicks are heating up.
The Knicks, they're still adjusted to life without their captain, Jalen Brunson. Now there's some clarity about a period of time when Brunson might be able to return to the court. So much to discuss about where the Bockers are after their road trip and what's ahead for them. So we're going to discuss it with one of my favorite people to talk to around the Knicks. She is a contributor to the Knick of Time Show. Her name is Ebony, a.k.a. Mad Knick Fan. She joins me now. Ebony, what's going on?
How you doing, Dex? Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk Knicks with you.
I'm glad to have you on. You know what just popped in my mind because I realized I don't know the answer to this question. Why do they call you the Mad Knick Fan? Because my interactions with you, you've never been mad unless you meant it like crazy, but you're not angry. You know, I feel like you're pretty positive. So why do they call you the Mad Knick Fan?
I get that question a lot. I really do. It's just because I got mad at the outsiders how they talk about the Knicks. It would make me mad. And then I'll find myself in people's comments and going and debating and you know, trying to stand up, and just the outside media coverage also on the Knicks for clicks, as we like to call it. Just the people, you know, they're not really watching the Knicks. It made me mad. So
okay, see, now I got it. I don't know, it just popped in my head. I don't know why I never asked you this before, but I understand it. What people should know is we don't do Knicks for clicks here. That is not something we do at all here. We're here for nuanced discussion, which Ebony and I are going to have today. And when I come on Knick of Time Show with Ebony, Jay Ellis, Lee, the crew, you know, we always have these discussions. So, Ebony, let's start with the news that came down from ESPN Shams Charania on Saturday. So, Charania reported that Jalen Brunson expected to miss another 1 to 2 weeks with an ankle sprain. He will be reevaluated on Thursday, but expected to remain sidelined through late March or early April. Are you concerned that Brunson is going to have enough time to ramp up and get ready for the playoffs?
No, I'm not. I'm not concerned. I think with the Jalen Brunson's game, you know, he's athletic, but not super athletic. He's just a lot of smarts and footwork. I think that he'll be okay. And the fact that I think that the front office, which I'm a fan of, that they learn from past injury experiences and maybe rushing a player back. So I think this time it might be like you mentioned, it might be a blessing in disguise. I'm okay with them taking their time and getting Brunson back, and I know he's a pro's pro. He's going to do whatever he has to do to get back, you know, and without restrictions.
Yeah.
And so that I'm not worried. I think this is why this team was built, so we didn't solely have to depend on one person. They built this team in mind of injuries, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's fair because I think even if he's back late March, early April, you know, I noticed somewhere he could play 5-6 games before the playoffs. I think that could be enough time for him to ramp up. I understand that some fans are concerned about that, but I think the Knicks also, as you said, Ebony, they have to be very cautious with this, right? You can't rush him back. The goal is to have him healthy for the playoffs, so I think he'll have enough time to get ready. And like you said, Jalen Brunson, we know what he's about. He's going to make sure that he's ready for the playoffs, and then it's about getting the other guys ready. Now, in terms of getting ready for the playoffs, Ebony, they just had this West Coast road trip. They finished 2-3. How would you assess the Knicks' performance on the West Coast road trip after finishing 2-3 and most of it without Jalen Brunson?
Yeah, I thought New York played hard. That's what you want to ask. They didn't back down, no giving excuses, trying to find a way. It's going to be up and down. You're trying to replace a 26-point per game scorer. You're not going to do that with one person. You have to do that as a team. I feel that's what we're trying to do. I feel we're improving in areas that have been a problem, aside from maybe, you know, the transition defense. But but the rebounding, the protecting the paint, we're getting better with that. The help defense, team defense, things that we had problem in, in the towards in the season, we're improving. So as long as that keeps happening, it's sky's the limit for this team.
All right, positive with the improvement for the Knicks. But one thing I've noticed with Brunson out, right, we've seen just a bit of a drop off in the team's offense, which I think you would agree was to be expected, right? You said you're losing the 26-point per game scorer. How concerned, if at all, should Knicks fans be about the offense dropping from 118 to 113 points per 100 possessions over the 3 games? This is prior to the Warriors game. I'm not factoring the data from the Warriors game in this, but in the 3 games prior to that, you saw the offense drop from 118 to 113 points per 100 possessions. Is there any concern in your eyes about this, or was it, this is what I expected to happen?
Well, yeah, this is what I expected to happen. It's a short sample size right now. So I understand exactly, like you mentioned, why the points would drop off. We're trying to, you can't really replace JB, especially at one person. You have to do that as a unit. And being that it's not so many games, and we've had some great games in this little stretch. We blew out the Kings, had some exciting games with the Mikal game winner. So being that those happen, and then the fact that we had like 12 steals in two of those games or 3 of those games, pretty that's good. That's great defense, getting in the passing lane, things like that. So I think I don't think we should worry. I really don't. I really think, that we have enough as a unit if we play as a team to hold us down until Brunson returns.
So you just mentioned the defense, which I'm going to get into in 1 second, but I'm going to stick with the offense right here because OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, I think if you've been watching these last couple of games, they've been a little bit more aggressive on the offensive end recently. Do you think they're starting to gain confidence in their scoring abilities and also playmaking, and how important is that for this Knicks squad moving forward?
It's super important. I'm loving it. I'm loving OG and Mikal's aggressiveness. And they're showing us their whole bag, showing us everything in the arsenal. It's just, you see OG Euro stepping, you see him trying to make plays off of the dribble. Same thing with Mikal. You see him in his element, moving off the screens, playmaking a little bit. They're just showing you a little bit, being super aggressive when needed. In some games, in other games we were up and down, but again, that's expected because we're learning how to adjust to a life without Jalen Brunson right now. So again, I understand that, but they're trying in different ways. I seen OG drop step somebody in a prior game. Like, what? Okay, OG. I seen Mikal, that game winner was huge. That has to lift your confidence, especially at the time when he might have been questioning his role. That has to put a lot of confidence in you. Has to. So, and we need that. We need that. We're going to need that for the rest of the season and the playoffs.
I'm glad I'm
I
not.
just
I'm sorry to cut you off. I said I'm glad I'm not alone because I've seen some things from both Mikal and OG bringing out of their bag that I didn't think that they have. But I apologize for cutting you off. You can continue.
Now, I just wanted to add on that and again, OG Mikal, it's not really forcing. Instead of deferring to maybe Jalen Brunson as they would, because they're ultimate team players. They're going to do whatever they're star in their role, as I like to say. I say, you don't need a bunch of superstars, just a bunch of people that star in their role. And Mikal and OG do that. I give them grace because a lot of times they're involved, their impact doesn't make it on the stat sheet. So I'm loving that they're getting aggressive on the offensive end. It's going to pay off in the playoffs, I believe.
I love what you said there. You don't always need a bunch of superstars. You just need some people that star in their role. That's a bar right there. I like that for sure. That's a good one for there. Now, on the defensive side, right, Ebony? The Knicks defense, I know, again, this is a very small sample size, just to be clear here, folks. The Knicks defense has improved from a 114 defensive rating to 107 without Brunson during the first 3 games that they played without the captain since the injury. And the Knicks went 2-1 in those games. And that rating, again, small sample size, fourth best defensive rating in the NBA across that time. So do you think this team, Ebony, can lean on its defense, which has been trending in the right direction, to win these games until he returns?
Yes, like the greats say, Bill Russell, Pat Summers, they all said, what wins championships? Defense and rebounding. That has been a flaw of ours this season. So adding with Mitch coming back, he helps. As my somebody, a friend of mine on Twitter would say, Ev would say, resistance. He brings back our resistance, making it difficult for other teams. So we can make it ugly, and we've been winning the ugly game. So this, in this stretch, mainly we've when Mitch first came back, especially with JB. But now that there's no JB, we can get turn defense, into offense. Get buckets in other areas. Maybe get some offensive rebounds as we have been seeing. And when Mitch gets his win back, because he has to get that back. But other than that, it's just if we can continue to improve in the small things and not solely have to depend on a half court offense, it will make the game a lot easier for us and confuse other teams when it comes to offense, because you're not going to know who's going to get the shot, who gets that last shot, who's getting the shot, period, because you're doing it as a team. And again, and getting easy buckets and transition, second chance points and turnovers. Because I mentioned we had 12 points in 2 of these games that we just played. 12 steals, sorry about that.
12 steals, right. 12 steals, and they've been getting, as you said, getting into the passing lanes, doing those things that are necessary to win on the defensive end. Now, Ebony, I know you've seen this on social media too, because I've seen and heard this belief that's been out there. And I'm curious as to what you think about this, because do you think that Jalen Brunson's injury that's happened could actually be a blessing in disguise by forcing other players to step up, by making the Knicks not as predictable as you just mentioned within the half-court offense? Do you agree with that take, that his injury might have been a blessing in disguise for this team down the stretch of the regular season?
Yes, like I try to be as optimistic as I can, I guess. As they say in a social media world, some people may say I'm company man, and as they say. But I think I look at injuries, like you mentioned, as a blessing in disguise. You get to see other people with added usage. You get to see what they're made of in the clutch when they might not have the ball normally. So I like to see it because, again, these players are in the NBA for a reason. A lot of time it's a system. It's a system, and they know the pecking order. They understand they have to give it to the best player. But when your best player is not there, you have to get the best available shot now. And I feel that we've done that a couple of games. Again, it's inconsistent, but we're trying to find our way right now. And I think that when you think about all the champions in the past, they had others contribute. They had the supporting cast came through when they needed them. And when you don't have your superstar, it forces people to take the tough shots. You get to see their whole game. We get to see Shamit in the mid-range, who's been sitting on the outside majority of the season. We get to see some mid-range these last couple of games, him working the mid-range. We get to see added usage for Deuce, and Deuce show you that he can play with the best. He can lock up, he can make it difficult for greats like Stephen Curry and then come down and get a bucket for you. That has to add confidence. And then in the playoffs, when you need the confidence at an all-time high, and you need your players not to hesitate and make the right reads, this is why you use the regular season. These moments right here are what they remember in the playoffs. It doesn't feel new to them. They're used to
it. Yeah. You said what I said. This is the argument I've kind of been making, not overall, Ebony, but I know I've talked about it when I've come on the show with you guys and other platforms. There's a lot of talk about the minutes, right? With Tom Thibodeau, the minutes police. It's not always the minutes, but the experience that guys can get, right? And even in this, with an injury down, we always hear next man up. That's the term we always hear. But you made so many good points there about what Miles McBride can do, not just on the offensive end, but the defensive end. Landry Shamet, that's another great point. You can see his confidence starting to grow. And you see, this also affects the coaching staff. You've seen Tom Thibodeau give him some more minutes, right? We've seen him get that experience. So this brings me to where I'm going to go next with Tom Thibodeau. And no, I'm not going to go all into the minutes police here. I'm going to try to avoid some of that. But there's been a great deal of talk about the head coach, Tom Thibodeau, among the fan base and the media since the incident, we'll put air quotes on that, with Mikal Bridges and Tibbs last week. But when you look at Tibbs and how he's coached since Jalen Brunson went down, what has stood out to you about Tibbs' rotation adjustments since Brunson's been out with his injury? Is there anything that you look at and say, oh, I like what he's doing, or I don't like what he's doing here?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of Derrick Rose. So being a huge fan of Derrick Rose, I got to know Tibbs a little bit. And I know how they say teaching the old dog new tricks. It seems like with Tibbs, he does his best when he's forced out of his comfort zone. When when something's taken away from him and he has to adjust. That's when we see the best of Tibbs to me, because then he mixes it up a little bit. He tries a little bit more lineups that maybe he wouldn't have tried early in the season. Granted, I wish he would have tried some of this stuff early in the season. I'm thankful for at least now. I take what I could get. but I think him trying different lineups, I would like to see more of Cat and Mitch together. But I understand why that's not happening. Mitch has to get his win back, and then maybe that'll happen a little bit more. Right now, he's staggering and trying to stagger him with the injury, probably the hot 40, and him playing precious and spot minutes right now. But what I do like with Tibbs is that he's running plays for people that normally might not get the plays. I've always said Tibbs can be very predictable with his offense, so much so I think that's why we're having problems with our inbound plays, because everybody knows when we're running, what we're going to run. We saw that with the likes of Steve Kerr. It's a great coach, so they're and Golden State is a very smart team. They knew what we were running. So with Tibbs, I like to say that when he doesn't have his comfort blankets, he is an invite to Rap City. He freestyles a little bit more. Like in rap, he freestyles a little bit more, and I like that. I like he listens to the game a little bit more to me when he doesn't have his comfort break, when he's forced out that comfort zone. So again, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how again he responds, because this is a big year for him too.
It is, and there's a lot more to talk about that down the road with him and how this is a big year for him. I do agree with that point too. I think he is forced a bit more out of his comfort zone. He's going to play different lineups. You've seen, as I said, Shamet get some more minutes. Now, I'm also with you. I've never been big on the minutes, Ebony. I've always said, could he give Pacome Dadier 5 minutes here against lower competition, right? Could that happen so we can get that experience? Because I believe this is what the regular season is for. Like you just said, it's to learn. It's for guys to have the confidence. So if they are needed, even if they are not by the playoffs, they can have that confidence. And now, I do think there's some guys, whether it's Mikal Bridges, OG we talked about, Landry Shamet, they're getting that confidence, and maybe the offense won't be as heliocentric by the time JB comes back. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Got a couple more things for you. Let's go. Yeah, you got to keep those fingers crossed. Knicks fans are doing that. Keep the fingers crossed, knock on the wood, got to do whatever you got to do. Okay, I generally don't do this too early, but I want to look ahead. Look at some potential first-round playoff matchups for the Knicks. I think right now, potentially, the Knicks can play. They're in the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference, so possibilities are open. It could be the Bucks, it could be the Pacers, it could be the Pistons. Who, in your eyes, would be the most favorable opponent for the Knicks to face in the first round?
See, especially with this team, I think we're gonna win every game until we lose, right? So I'm okay with whoever, but if I had to pick, I would pick Detroit, because they're young, and I know they do have some vets there, but the star is young and inexperienced. You look at the style of play. They're a fast-paced team. In the playoffs, the game normally slows down. They can give up a lot of threes. Teams attempt a lot of threes against them season-wise. They also don't shoot a lot of threes. So yeah, they're great at defending the paint, great at rebounding. So that's great. That's a good start, because that's what wins championships, like I mentioned earlier. But the other stuff, the pace. How do you look in a slow pace? How do you look in the playoffs. Pressure makes players look differently. The old saying, "Pressure busts pipes." Pause. But does that saying ring true for Detroit? And that's why I would turnovers in playoffs is huge. That could be game changer right there. They're like number 23, I believe, in the league in turnovers right now. So again, I know Detroit is young, they're hungry. I like them as a team, but if you're just saying that they have to prove it, that's where you make people believers in the playoffs to me.
Yeah, Detroit, I've seen, because when we do our New York Got Game live show, there's been some people in the comments who've said, oh, the Knicks should try to avoid Detroit, and I know Detroit's given the Knicks a little bit of problems this year. The Knicks did blow them out the first time they played them early in the season, blew them out by like 30 or whatever it was. And I'm with you, Malik Beasley has been a Knick killer, but this team has to show in the playoffs, and are they ready when they come into a raucous Madison Square Garden? It sounds to me, from what you're saying, you think they're a favorable matchup, but you also are not of the mindset, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Ebony, are you about the Knicks ducking the smoke and maybe trying to avoid Detroit? Because there's been some talk about, maybe they should drop to 4 so they could get the Cavs in the second round or the Pacers and Bucks in the first round and not to play the Pistons. You're not with that in terms of them trying to avoid the Pistons.
No, and it's JB that's their coach, right? Right, that's the coach.
Yep, JB.
Last time JB came against Tibbs, kind of outcoached him, right? So I think that maybe mind games may play too.
Could be a bit of that.
Hopefully, but I just think youth and where their flaws are can be detrimental in the playoffs. Can be real costly during the playoffs if that continues.
Yeah, I respect the Pistons. I think they've had a good season. I'm with you, but I don't think they're to be feared or the Knicks should be ducking the smoke to avoid them. I don't think that's necessarily what they should do. All right, last thing for me here, Ebony. Let's look at this week. Knicks have a stretch of winnable games coming up this week. They've got the Heat at home. Then they're on the road for the Spurs and the Hornets. Then they face the Wizards at end of the week on Saturday. So 4 games this week. How important is it for the Knicks to take care of business and build some momentum in these winnable games against teams that I think they should be favored against in each of these games?
Again, it goes back to confidence. So you want to practice, and like Charles Barkley, I don't agree with most stuff he says sometimes, but I agree with he said. He mentioned that you can't turn it off and on. You know how people sit players towards the end. He's like, you can't turn it off and on as a team in the playoffs. So these games are super important. It's super important for us to work on the team that we want to be in the playoffs. Work towards being the team we want to be in the playoffs. Whatever flaws we feel we have, whatever it is that's not working, we can work on that right now. And gaining the confidence of the people. If the teams is supposedly winnable, you get to run what you want and try things that you want to see in the playoffs, and that's the main goal. You just use these games as practice, basically, towards your playoffs game. Every focus, staying locked in. If it's clutch situations, not turning the ball over, not giving open shots, missing defensive, assignments. Cat not dropping on LaMelo, please don't do that. Stuff of that nature we can all work on.
Yeah.
And get again the confidence. That's the biggest thing for the playoffs. Mikal, OG, they have game winners when it's the game is on the line. They're not freezing. You're not shell shocked. You're ready for the moment, and that's what you want for your team, to be ready in any situation.
Yeah, that's what you want for the playoffs. There is still time for the Knicks to work on that. Look, Ebony, I know you said you think the Knicks can win every game. This feels like it would be a nice week for the Knicks to go 4-0. It would be a nice time for them to win all 4 of these winnable games that they have. That is Ebony, a.k.a. the Mad Knick Fan. But people, if you watch this conversation, you didn't see her get mad. She had a lot of good insight here, and it was good. So, Ebony, I got to tell you, I understand why you get mad for the Knicks, for clicks, people. But see, when you're here with me on New York Got Game, there's not going to be any of that. We don't have any of that going on.
Never with you. Always a pleasure to talk Knicks with you.
Same here.
And I try not to get mad at the community, family bond type vibes. I
There you
try to.
go.
I keep that for the outsiders.
Keep it for the outsiders. Family vibes here. Appreciate you again. Check out, follow Ebony and the work she does with the Knick of Time Show. Always good to have a fellow Brooklynite here on the show with me. Ebony, I'll have you back on soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
The Liberty are heating up.
The New York Liberty, they continue to make moves to bolster their roster as they prepare to defend their WNBA title. On Sunday, the team announced that they acquired veteran guard Natasha Cloud from the Connecticut Sun in exchange for the 7th overall pick in this year's draft and New York's 2026 first-round pick. So let's talk about the deal. We're going to do it with a women's basketball contributor for ESPN, the great Maria Marino. Joins me now here on New York Got Game. Maria, how are you doing? Offseason news, it never stops. It continues for us here. How's it going?
You got a 2-for-1 Maria deal because we were expecting to talk about Women's March Madness just after the bracket reveal. We get a little WNBA off-season news as well. So excited about the Liberty continuing to make moves.
I am excited about it. We got to talk about it. So, Maria, I got to say this because my colleague, women's sports reporter for the New York Post, Madeline Kenny, she reported a few weeks ago that the Liberty were trying to get Natasha Cloud for the 7th pick in this year's draft, which Liberty owned. They ended up giving up that pick and next year's first rounder for Cloud. Was that a steep price to pay for the 33-year-old guard?
I mean, it's pretty steep just because the talent that we see coming out of women's college basketball is definitely at an all-time high. But at the same time, I don't mind it because this just shows that the Liberty are in win now mode. And if they think that Natasha Cloud is a piece that can help them defend their title, which I believe she is, they're willing to part with the pick. It's not like it was the top pick in the draft or top 3 or top 5 even. And then, you assume that the Liberty being contenders again this year, it's not like, that pick necessarily is like you're giving up something super crazy. It's an unproven asset, obviously. So to me, I don't mind it, like I said, because it's win now for the Liberty.
Yeah, it's win now. You don't know if you'd have got somebody with the 7th pick that would help you as much immediately as Natasha Cloud could this year. How does this acquisition, Maria, of Natasha Cloud help a Liberty team who lost Courtney Vandersloot in free agency? How does her being on this Liberty roster, how can she help them?
Well, I think this helps the Liberty in a number of ways, even more so than Courtney Vandersloot, who had changed her role a bit, especially going into the postseason last year. She was coming off the bench, and I do think that there were some questions about her defensively. More so to me, this helps fill the void left by Kayla Thornton, who was a really great defender for the Liberty, and Natasha Cloud is known for her defense. Also, I do think this gives them some flexibility, given that we learned that Benajelani Hamilton was injured a few weeks ago at Unrivaled. We don't have a lot of details on that injury, but it gives the Liberty a bit of an insurance policy for a player in Laney Hamilton who had to miss some time last season, had a knee cleanup procedure, was able, thankfully, to help the Liberty in the finals, but still just to have some extra depth. And you have to remember too that we have Leonie Febish back. She was the rookie sensation from a year ago who just changed everything for the Liberty. But again, if Laney Hamilton's not 100%, I could see Leo sort of staying in that starting lineup. And then what about Maureen Johannes? The Liberty still own her rights. She's expected to make a return, and she's the French national team star who really helped the Liberty, not last season because of the Olympics, but the season prior. So I'm seeing a lot more options in this backcourt for the Liberty.
Yeah, a lot of options, a lot of good backcourt depth. Great point there about Benajelani Hamilton. If she's not ready to go for the start of the season, you have Natasha Cloud who can help on the perimeter with defense. So the Liberty have an embarrassment of riches now at the guard and wing positions there, so should bode well for them. Now, there was some thought, Maria, that I've heard this from people would come up and talk to me about this around the Liberty. The Liberty, they had a quiet offseason. But this move right here to get Natasha Cloud it's a major move to bring her in. What do you make of what New York has done this offseason, and do you like their chances to repeat as champs in 2025?
Well, you notice that probably the two teams that had the quote unquote quietest off seasons were the two teams that were in the finals last year. Why? Because they like their team, they like their depth, they like their chemistry. I personally, a couple weeks ago, had on my sort of power rankings, if you will, I actually really liked Minnesota because the Liberty lost Kayla Thornton. But now that the Liberty bring in Natasha Cloud, who I just think that Cloud sort of embodies a lot of things that the New York front office values, right? Like I said, she is a great defender. She's a high IQ player. She can find her teammates. She's incredibly intense. I think back to not last year, but the year before when she was still on Washington and they were playing at Barclays Center and she was phenomenal. I think she will be thriving in the New York market. I just think that she's that type of player. And so I think the Liberty feel really, really good about adding her. And I do think that it adds a whole another whole dimension to this Liberty squad. So now I think I have New York on I'm flip-flopping my power rankings now. I think I like New York's chances of taking home the title with this addition, although I do still feel that Minnesota is going to be incredibly motivated, and they have somebody who I think is majorly motivated and is also showing she's one of, if not the best player, out there, and that's Nafisa Collier. So it's going to be hard to repeat. Vegas, when they repeated, that was the first time in like 20 years that the W had a repeat champion. So it's hard to do, but I do think that this move helps ensure that the Liberty have the best chance of that happening.
Yep, it sure should help that. It's going to be exciting. W season is coming sooner than we realize. So much to talk about with the Liberty, but news breaking on Sunday that the Liberty acquired Natasha Cloud, a huge addition to their roster. That is Maria Marino. Check her out as a contributor to ESPN with women's basketball. Maria, appreciate you joining me for the second week in a row on New York Got Game. That doesn't happen too often. You are in rarefied air with that, but we appreciate you coming through. Thank you.
I mean, I got to talk Knicks with you. I got to talk March Madness and Liberty. Come on, like this couldn't be better. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Maria. Thank you. All right, before we get out of here, we got to talk about the St. John's Red Storm. Fantastic season for the Johnnies. 30 wins, 30-4 record. Got to be impressed by that. Now they're on to the NCAA tournament where they are the number 2 seed out west. But when you look at this season for St. John's, it's really been about grit. It's been about determination, and they've had the will to win. You have to be impressed with the fact they won the Big East tournament title on Saturday, and before that, they had won the Big East regular season title. After the regular season title, I had questions as to whether they could take it up another notch, where things got real, and they definitely proved that. You've got to be impressed by the resiliency of this team. Anytime they're down, they can come back, and a lot of that is because of the defense. That is because of their belief in their head coach, and Rick Pitino. And now, they've got the fans here in New York believing they are New York's team. And now New York's college basketball team has given New York basketball fans something to cheer about as they embark on a journey this March. How far can they go in the NCAA tournament? I'm not sure, but I don't think it's crazy to think they can make a deep run. Can they get to the Elite Eight? Can they get to the Final Four? Some people might even say they can get to the national championship game. Maybe, but this St. John's team is good. It starts with a defense, and it could be a very special spring here in New York around college basketball before we even get to talking about what the Knicks can do this spring. Right now, a lot of the basketball attention is going to be on the St. John's Red Storm, and that attention is well-deserved. That does it for this edition of New York Got Game. Got to thank my guests who came through for this one. Ebony of the Knick of Time Show to talk some Knicks, and Maria Marino. She came through last minute to talk some Liberty hoops with their trade for Natasha Cloud. Appreciate her coming through. Got to thank the people that make this show look as good as it always does. My producer, Nicholas Frederico, my production assistant, Jeff Stansberry, and editor, Corey Porter. Thank you guys for all that you do. That does it again for this edition of New York Got Game. We'll be back next week with another edition. See you then.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.